I don't owe you anything. You chose to give birth to me. I never asked to be born. So stop acting like I'm in debt to you." That was the last thing my son said to me over the phone. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. I just sat there in the corner of my cold little kitchen, fingers clenched so tight they bled. The house was silent as a graveyard, and I felt like a ghost still walking. My name is Maria. I'm 78, a widow for 10 years. I live alone in a faded apartment in San Francisco, a place that once held family dinners and laughter. Now it holds only the hum of an old fridge and the peeling wallpaper of forgotten years. David, my only son. He was my everything, my purpose. I worked 3 jobs for nearly 4 decades to raise him. I sold my jewelry, even my wedding ring, to pay his college tuition. I skipped meals, hid hospital stays so he wouldn't worry, because I couldn't afford both medicine and rent. But I never once complained. I believed a mother is meant to sacrifice. I remember the last time he visited, 6 months ago. He stayed 15 minutes, no hug, no warmth. He sat, checked his watch, and said flatly, "Mom, you're old. Stop interfering in my life." I stood frozen. His words cut deep, but I smiled, a broken smile, trying to protect what little dignity I had left. 3 years ago, he asked for money, for an investment. I didn't hesitate. I gave him everything, $80,000, my entire life savings. He promised he'd repay me soon. But since then, not a dollar has returned. I call, he doesn't answer. I text, he reads, never replies. Last week, when I asked for help to buy heart medicine, he snapped, "You're lucky you're still alive. Stop being a burden." I dropped the phone. My legs gave out. A neighbor came to help, worried. She told me, "David stopped by earlier but didn't come in. He just asked if the old lady was still alive, then left." I don't remember how long I sat by the window. The ocean wind stung my skin. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one my husband used to sit in with his newspaper. Now it was just vacant. I, Maria, the mother who gave everything, was now just a shadow, a faint memory in the mind of the boy I once carried for 9 long months. And the worst part isn't losing the money, it's realizing I'm no longer mom, I'm just a burden. I used to think that if I died, at least my son would cry. But after that day, I no longer believe he would. These past few nights, I haven't been able to sleep. Not because of old age or illness, but because David's words keep playing in my head like a verdict I can't appeal. "You're lucky to still be alive. Don't be a burden on me." A burden? I was the mother who stayed up all night when he had a fever. The woman who waited by the window every afternoon when school let out. The one who turned down every date, every chance at remarriage, so that my child would never have to feel like a boy without a father. And now I'm a burden. I opened the wooden drawer where I used to keep family photos. Now it holds only empty frames. I removed the picture of David hugging me at his graduation. Every time I looked at it, I felt like a fool, clinging to a love that no longer exists. My neighbor, Mrs. Lucy, stopped by with a pot of warm soup. She saw the color drained from my face and asked gently, "Why don't you ask David to help?" I just shook my head and gave a tired smile. I have asked, I used to ask, but the last time I begged him to take me to the doctor because I could no longer ride the bus alone, he said, "Just call a car service, Mom, I'm busy." Then he disappeared again, for weeks. Every day now feels like a broken clock, still existing but with no purpose. No one calls, no one needs me. I turn the television on just to hear voices. I turn the radio up to drown out the silence. But the louder I make the noise, the more deafening the emptiness inside me becomes. One day I stood in front of the mirror. My face was etched with wrinkles, my hair thin and gray, my eyes clouded like fog. I looked into those eyes and didn't recognize the woman staring back. "Maria," I whispered, "who are you in your son's eyes?" The answer came like a knife. No one. No longer the strong woman. No longer the devoted mother. No longer anything in his world. I am excess, a shadow that sits quietly in the corner, waiting for a doorbell that will never ring. At times, I've thought of letting go, of just fading away. But then I saw the letter my husband wrote me before he died. In it, he said, "Maria, you are the strongest woman I've ever known. If a day ever comes when you feel forgotten, remember this: you were never invisible to me. I was once the light in someone's eyes, and now I've allowed our sun to extinguish that flame." I lowered my head into my hands and whispered something no one heard. Do I no longer matter? I can't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep. Maybe it was the day David called me a burden. Since then, I haven't slept through a single night. Not because of insomnia in the medical sense, but because my mind no longer knows how to rest. I curl up on my narrow bed, under a threadbare blanket, thin enough to let the streetlight seep through. The room is so silent I can hear my own heartbeat, slow, heavy beats, as if even my heart is tired of continuing. Most nights, I get up around 2 a.m., wandering around the tiny apartment with no one else in sight. Sometimes I turn on the stove just to hear the soft click of the gas, then turn it off. Other times, I open my old mailbox and read the birthday cards David sent me when he was a little boy. His handwriting careful, innocent. "Mom, you're the best in the world." I keep every card, every line of ink, like evidence that once upon a time I was loved. That once I was Mom. But then I cry, not loudly, not with tears flowing. It's the kind of crying only the elderly know. A knot in the throat, a squeeze in the chest, followed by a long, aching silence in the dark. I've started avoiding mirrors. I don't want to see the old woman with hair falling in patches, shoulders curved like brittle branches in winter. I'm afraid of the eyes in the mirror because there's no hope in them, no light. Only a gaze that's grown too used to disappointment. I think about calling David, just to hear his voice, just to ask something trivial like, "Have you eaten today?" But I hesitate. I'm afraid he won't answer, or worse, he'll answer only to raise his voice again. The feeling of hearing your own child call you a nuisance, useless. It's not like being slapped, it's like being slowly suffocated. Gentle but relentless. No visible wound, but pain that runs all the way to the bone. I used to be strong, a woman who raised a child alone, cared for a sick husband, held a broken family together. But now I can't even push a chair away from the table without effort. I can't climb stairs without gasping. I've grown old, and I'm beginning to believe what my son says, that maybe I really am useless. Every night I think of my husband. I sit on the old balcony and look up at the deep black sky, asking silently, if you were still here, would I have to live like this? Then I find myself speaking into the empty air. I'm tired, John. So tired. Sometimes I even wish for a heart attack. Something strong enough to make sure I don't wake up, so I won't have to keep living in this limbo of forgetfulness. In this world where I feel like an extra piece, a leftover. But then I light incense for my husband, place my hand on his faded photograph, and whisper, "I can't go yet, but I don't know who I am anymore. I remember it was a Wednesday. The sky was gray, and a thick fog blanketed the street like a heavy quilt muffling all sound. I was boiling water, coughing into my sleeve. The house was so cold I had to wear 2 layers, but the chill inside me ran deeper than skin. I received a call from the local health center. They said a social worker would be visiting for a routine check-in. I didn't care. These kinds of visits were usually just protocol. Come in, ask a few questions, scribble in a notebook, and leave. But this time was different. A young woman knocked on my door. Her name was Elena, about David's age. She brought a bag of fruit and a gentle smile. I invited her in and made tea, like any old lady from the East Coast would. I thought she'd ask a few polite questions and be on her way, but she didn't. She looked around the apartment quietly, her eyes lingering on a photo frame turned face down. "Did you used to live with someone?" she asked softly. "I had a husband and a son," I replied, my voice low, as if afraid of my own words. Elena didn't say anything, just nodded, but her eyes saw right through me. And suddenly, something inside me cracked. Words started spilling out, as if I'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to really listen. I told her about David, about the savings, about the unanswered calls, about the sleepless nights, the old letters, the feeling of being invisible in my own home. She listened without interrupting, no empty sympathy, no fake encouragement, just silence, and in that moment, her silence meant more than any words. When I finished with the sentence, "Maybe I'm just nothing now," Elena reached out and held my hand. Her grip was warm and steady. Then she said, "You weren't born to be disrespected." That was it, 6 words, soft as a whisper, but they sliced through the fog in my heart like a beam of light. I looked up, right into her eyes, and in that moment, something inside me stirred, like I had just woken up from a long, aching sleep. I had gotten used to being dismissed, used to David's silence, used to making excuses for him. He's busy, he's stressed, he'll call eventually. But the truth, he had forgotten me. He saw my existence as a burden, and worse, I had let myself believe that was okay. You weren't born to be disrespected. That sentence lit a small fire in me, faint, fragile, but stubborn. A flicker of defiance in a pile of cold ashes. I started asking myself, why was I silent? Why hadn't I demanded what was mine? Why had I been living like a shadow, waiting for scraps of attention from the very boy I raised with everything I had? I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something new. I wasn't just some discarded old woman. I was someone who had given her whole life, and I deserved to be treated with respect. That night, after Elena left, I sat frozen at the kitchen table. The tea had gone cold. The apple she brought was still unpeeled, but her words echoed in my head like a drumbeat I couldn't silence. You weren't born to be disrespected. I must have repeated that sentence a dozen times, as if saying it over and over could cleanse all the years of hurt that had seeped into my bones. I sat there alone for a long time. Then a question crept into my mind, quiet but sharp. If I wasn't born to be disrespected, then what am I still living for? It sounded so simple, but to me it was like a mirror, reflecting back every truth I had been avoiding. That somewhere along the way, I had lost myself, bit by bit. I had once been a devoted mother, a loyal wife, a patient, forgiving woman. But now that those roles had been taken from me, or worse, made to feel meaningless, what was left? I rose slowly and walked to the bedroom. I opened a worn wooden box my husband had made for our 30th anniversary. Inside were old letters, a few faded photographs, and a small notebook with frayed edges. I opened it. On the first page, in my own handwriting from nearly 40 years ago, were the words, "Things I want to do for myself after David grows up." I had written down little dreams: learn pottery, visit a seaside town, write a memoir, adopt a cat. I stared at the faded ink, my hands trembling. Not from age, but from something awakening deep inside me. I had forgotten myself for too long. I had lived other people's lives, for others, because of others, and controlled by others. But me? Where was I in any of that? I closed the notebook and hugged it to my chest, like I was trying to reclaim a lost version of myself, buried beneath years of motherhood, wifehood, and the silence I thought was kindness. I stepped onto the balcony. The night wind still carried its chill, but this time I didn't flinch. I tilted my face to the sky. The stars were faint, like me right now, but they were still there, and I thought to myself, if I'm still alive, then I want to live for me. I didn't know where to start. I wasn't tech-savvy. I didn't know the law. I had no idea how to get back the money David had taken. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't stay silent anymore. Tomorrow I would find that old savings account book. I would look at the numbers, at what was gone. I would call the legal aid center Elena had mentioned. I would ask, learn, fight. Because I had spent too many years as a ghost. And I refused to leave this world without a name, as if I never existed at all. I am Maria. I once forgot myself, but now I want to be remembered. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, not because of the cold, not because of the coughing fits I'd grown used to. No, this time my heart was racing. Something inside me was pushing me to move. For the first time in a long while, I felt alive. I opened the cabinet and pulled out an old file folder, its surface coated in dust. Inside were my savings passbook, insurance papers, and copies of house documents. Everything I used to call my last safety net, now gone, sitting in my son's hands. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages and checked the numbers. My savings account once held over $79,000. I remembered it clearly. That was the amount I had given David. No contract, no terms, just 2 words: I trust you. I sat there, frozen for a while. Then I grabbed a scrap of paper and scribbled down that number. I drew a bold line under it. My money, my labor, not a gift. I remembered Elena had once mentioned a free legal aid center for seniors. I looked for the flyer she'd left behind and carefully dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times. A calm male voice answered, "Community Legal Center. How can I assist you?" I swallowed hard. I had never made a call like this before. I hesitated. "My name is Maria. I want to ask, if a family member took my money and never returned it, what can I do?" There was a brief pause. Then the voice responded gently, "We're here to listen from the beginning. Take your time, ma'am. Please tell us everything." And I did, slowly, haltingly, but truthfully. No more hiding, no more making excuses for David. I told them about the money, the promise, the silence, and the betrayal. I told them I didn't want revenge. I wanted fairness. I wanted my son to understand. I'm not a withered tree that anyone can shake to drop its last remaining leaves. The call lasted nearly an hour. In the end, they scheduled an appointment for me to come into the office next week and begin filing the paperwork. They said a lawyer would go through the details with me. I might not recover everything, but I had the right to ask, the right to be heard. I hung up the phone, my eyes blurred, but not from sorrow, from something else. because I had just done something I never imagined I would. I chose me. I chose truth, even if it hurt. I chose to confront instead of hide. And I knew this was the real beginning of freedom. I stood before the mirror. The woman staring back was still old, still graying, still trembling. But her eyes were different. For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of light in them. I called David. After days of hesitation, I decided, no more texts, no more silence. I wanted to hear his voice, directly. The phone rang twice, then disconnected. I called again. On the third try, he picked up. His voice was sharp. "What is it, Mom? I'm in a meeting." I took a deep breath. "I need to talk, in person." There was a pause. Then his annoyed tone came through. "Can't it wait until tomorrow?" "I'm busy." "No," I said firmly. "I'm coming to your place this afternoon. I need to speak, and you need to listen." I hung up before he could protest. I didn't know where this courage came from. Maybe from all the sleepless nights. Maybe from Elena's words. Or maybe from the betrayal that had built up into a quiet, burning rage. That afternoon, I put on my thick coat, grabbed my folder, and took the bus. 2 transfers, nearly 90 minutes, to reach his upscale apartment complex. I stood outside his door, heart pounding, but my hand was steady. I rang the bell. David opened the door, surprised. His face quickly darkened. "What are you doing here? I told you not to." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to speak first. It's my turn now." I walked in. No invitation, no hesitance like before. I placed the folder on his sleek glass table. I pulled out a copy of my savings account, a bank transfer record, handwritten notes. "This is the money I saved my whole life. Nearly $80,000. I gave it to you because I trusted you, and you've stayed silent. No explanation, no respect." David frowned, annoyed. "Why are you being so dramatic?" "I'm your son. Why are you making this into some big deal?" I looked him straight in the eyes. No tears, no shrinking. "Exactly, because I'm your mother. It hurts more than anything." I pulled out one more sheet, the appointment slip for next week's meeting with a legal advisor. "I've called the Legal Aid Center. I'm prepared to file a claim if necessary." David went pale. He took a half step back. You're really going to do this?" I nodded, slowly and clearly. "Yes, because I didn't live all these years just to be treated like I don't matter." I saw his lips tighten. He wanted to fight back, but he had no words. For the first time, he wasn't in control. For the first time, he couldn't guilt me back into silence. I turned away, heading for the door. Before I left, I said, "If you have any conscience left, ask yourself, who was I to you?" I didn't expect him to cry. I didn't expect an apology. I just wanted him to know. I walked out of that apartment with steady steps. The sky was still cold, but inside me, something was burning. Not anger. It was something deeper. The fire of return. Return to dignity, to voice, to the woman I used to be. I am Maria. And today I stood tall for the first time in years. After confronting David, I returned home with a strange calm. Not triumphant, not angry, just a quiet I hadn't felt in years. It was the kind of silence that follows a beginning, like I had just placed the first brick after years of staring at ruins. I turned on the lights. My apartment was still old, still cold, still quiet, but I no longer felt small inside it, no longer a flickering shadow in someone else's space. This was my home, and for the first time in years, I felt I belonged fully within it. The next morning, I cleaned out my bookshelf. I found an old expense notebook from my working years. Every line detailed what I bought. what David needed, what bills I paid. I chuckled, half amused, half sad. All those years I tracked every cent for others. But never once had I sat down and done the math for myself. I pulled out a fresh notebook and started writing down my monthly expenses. I went to the bank and opened a new savings account in my name only. I asked the clerk to teach me how to use online banking. They looked surprised, a silver-haired woman asking about mobile apps, but then they smiled, and I smiled back. My first victory wasn't getting the money back, it was getting my power back. The following week, I went to the legal aid center as scheduled. The attorney who received my file was a woman in her 40s, sharp eyes but warm demeanor. She listened as I told her everything. No interruptions, no pity. "I can't promise you'll recover everything," she said, "but you do have the right to seek justice." I nodded. I didn't need it all. I just needed this one time to stand up for myself. In the days that followed, I learned how to schedule doctor appointments online. I joined a women's circle at a local church, mostly older ladies like me. We talked about inheritance law, retirement planning, and how to live alone without feeling lonely. I still lived in the same small apartment, still cooked alone, still walked to the bus stop with legs that weren't as strong as before. But now every step no longer felt lost. I started replanting an old flower pot on my balcony. I reopened books I had once left unfinished. I began writing in a journal, not to complain, but to document my return. Today I made sweet potato soup, a little too salty, but for the first time in months, I ate because I wanted to. I learned how to use Google Maps today, got lost once, but at least I went. Each line in that journal was a tile in the path I was building, back to myself, a quiet reminder that I was still here, that I was still alive, and most of all, I was no longer waiting for anyone else to save me. I still live in that same old apartment. The walls are still stained. The floorboards still creak with every step. But this place is no longer a prison of painful memories. It's where I began again. Every morning I brew a pot of tea, just for me. I no longer set out a second cup. I sit on the balcony and watch the sunlight, kiss the new flowers I planted. I breathe in deeply. The San Francisco air is still crisp and cold, but it no longer chills me to the bone. I've learned how to live alone, and surprisingly, I find it peaceful. There are no more sighs to brace for, no more ears straining for a phone that won't ring, no more eyes that look at me as if I'm a burden. There is only me, and a silence that feels honest. I am not lonely. Because now being alone is a choice, and that changes everything. I joined a light yoga class at the community center. My aging body can still stretch, still move, slowly but surely. And for the first time in years, I feel truly alive. I returned to books I left half-read decades ago. The pages are yellowed, but the words feel fresh. I read not to pass time, but to nourish a soul that is rediscovering itself. I received an update from the Legal Aid Center. My case has been officially accepted. They said the process may take time, but I have the right to be represented. I smiled. I don't need speed, I need recognition. David hasn't called back, but I no longer wait. I'm not hoping for remorse. I'm not clinging to resentment. Whatever is meant to come will come when it's time. One afternoon, I received a letter from a woman in the church group. In it, she wrote, "I thought I had died in silence, but when I heard your story, I started writing the first page of my own life again." I read the letter, and tears came, not from sadness, but from joy. Joy in knowing that I am no longer invisible, that my story, my pain, my rising had reached someone's heart. I once believed my life had closed its final chapter, but now I know. When you dare to face your truth and move forward, life opens itself in a new way. No longer grand, but full. No longer crowded, but real. I am Maria. I live alone, but I am not lonely. I sat by the window, holding a cup of tea, watching the golden sunset slowly sink behind the old rooftops. The light was fading, but inside me, things had never felt brighter. I don't have many years left ahead of me, but I'm no longer afraid. I'm not afraid of being alone, because I've learned to befriend myself. I'm not afraid of being forgotten, because I've left a mark, not in someone else's memory, but in the quiet path I carved by walking through my own darkness. I think back to the woman I was just a year ago, a quiet Maria, shrinking in silence, afraid of speaking, clinging to shadows. And now I think of who I've become, still the same woman, but with a flame that's been reignited. I used to be weak, but I'm no longer blind. I used to stay silent, but I no longer accept disrespect. I didn't recover all the money, and David still hasn't called? But that no longer matters. I don't need my son to apologize to know I deserve respect. I don't need anyone to admit they were wrong for me to believe that I was right to stand up. The greatest validation, finally, has come from within. I look out to the street. A woman around my age is walking her dog, a book tucked under her arm. I smile. Maybe tomorrow I'll do the same, slowly, freely, on my own terms. I place my hand over my heart, feeling it beat, slow but steady. I'm still here. I'm still me. And I want to say this to anyone who feels forgotten, dismissed, or pushed aside by a world that moves too fast. It's never too late to live for yourself. Never too late to begin again. Never too late to say, that's enough. Never too late to remember you were once a light, and you still can shine in your own way. I am Maria. I have lost a lot, but I've found what matters most, me.